Behind the scene with David Bedein in Jerusalem, at a time when the subject of human rights is so widely discussed. President Biden, in his visit this week to Israel and Saudi Arabia, announced that he was increasing the amount of money for UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, by $200 million. Now, that's very important to know that news item, because the Palestinian Authority, in their official briefing paper, announced that that UNRWA is now serving 6.7 million Palestinian Arabs in 59 temporary refugee camps set up for displaced persons from the 1948 Israel War of Independence. Now, it's very important to know that the UNRWA population represents third and fourth generation refugees. Now, what is when you offer them money? Is it offering them to for a better life? No. UNRWA only says one thing about their future. They have to go back to where they lived before 1948. That's the only option that's open to them. Now, what the money is used for, 58% of the UNRWA budget of $1.6 billion goes for education, allocated from 67 nations and 33 humanitarian organizations. Now, UNRWA children represent the most educated refugee population in the world. But that may not be a positive development, because our review of more than 1,000 PA texts provided for UNRWA and examined by Arab education expert Dr. Aaron Gross showed that the new Palestinian curriculum used in UNRWA is basically dictates to them that their only option is to stay in these teeming refugee camps with no possibility of a future. Now, if forcing 6.7 million descendants of Arab refugees to live as refugees for perpetuity is not a violation of fundamental human rights and civil liberties, what is? Now, all this is in another context that Biden took time while he was in Israel and in Saudi Arabia to talk about a two-state solution. Now, if you look at the school books of the Palestinian Authority, which you can see on our website, Israel Behind the News, or the other website, UNRWAmonitor.com, you'll see every aspect of their curriculum not only works against, but violently opposes a two-state solution. The Palestinian Authority, which works under the aegis of the Palestine Liberation Organization, has set up every aspect of the curriculum to fight the existence of the state of Israel. Not only that, the maps they put out, all the Jewish cities all of a sudden have Arabic names, and the issue of glorifying violence is a focus. And most importantly, the flagship of the Palestinian Arab school system used by UNRWA is defending an Arab woman who murdered 38 people on a bus. Her name is Dalal al-Mughrabi, and that continues. Now, another issue that came out only today, a few days after the Biden visit, was the fact that the Biden administration asked Israel to abandon its cybersecurity, its cyber war on Iran. And that's the way in which they're tracking the Iranian nuclear issue. Now, that's something very serious, because that is Israel's basically mark line of defense, their ability to use in a peaceful way cyber abilities to find out what's going on. Now, one of the areas of the panaceas suggested to Israel for the whole situation is to rely on Saudi Arabia, except that Saudi Arabia is making it very clear that they will not make any peace with Israel so long as Israel controls the old city of Jerusalem and does not allow for a Palestinian Arab state, which would involve what they call right of return. So what's going on here? It's very confusing. So whereas the Biden administration passed the most important, significant legislation in July 2021, protecting Israel from egregious Arab incitement in its education and its refugee system, it's not being enforced. So the Biden administration, in the wake of the visit to Israel by President Biden, is not being very much respected here in Israel. But what's most important to understand is that whereas the Biden administration and Biden himself, while he was in Israel, could have asked for the Palestinian Authority to repeal its new law that if you murder a Jew, you get a salary for life. He did not do that. Nothing of that was even mentioned. So this is important, and understand the context for what we're reporting to you today. from Behind the Scene with David Bedein. Thank you.